All right, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Lunch with Mia program from the Maryland Insurance Administration. My name is Thomas Aloisi, and I'll be the moderator for today's event. We have a panel here today to discuss identity theft, fraud, and scams. Before we begin, Joyce is going to share a brief poll. This helps us learn more about promoting our events. If you don't see the poll, don't worry about it. It might not appear on all versions of Zoom. We've got about, looks like 86% of people are from email. Got 14% from Nextdoor, so that's great. All right, I want to remind you that this event is being recorded. Please keep cameras off and mics muted. We will have a question and answer session at the end. If at any point during the event you have a question, please enter that question in the chat box and we will get to it during the Q&A session. Please leave your question addressed to everyone in the chat. And as a reminder, we are not providing any legal advice today. For legal issues, you would need to contact a trusted financial advisor or an insurance producer or an actual lawyer. All right, so let's get started. Identity theft occurs when a person uses your personal information to commit fraud or unlawful activity. Using your social security number or date of birth, someone may open a new credit card or bank account in your name and even take out a loan using your personal information. Taking steps to protect your identity is important. Today, we will share some tips and best practices to protect you and your friends and family from identity theft, fraud, and scams. We will also discuss what to consider before purchasing identity theft insurance. We have a panel of 5 experts with us today. We'll first have our panelists introduce themselves and share some information about their organization. So panelists, experts, please take a minute to introduce yourselves, tell us about your organization, and describe the work you do to help Marylanders avoid identity theft, fraud, and scams. We'll start with Missy.
Hi, good morning. Thank you for having me. My name is Missy Coyne. I am the Regional Learning and Development Facilitator for the National Insurance Crime Bureau. The National Insurance Crime Bureau is a not-for-profit organization who is dedicated exclusively to fighting insurance fraud and crime. We have over 1,200 property casualty insurance companies, vehicle rental companies, auto auctions, vehicle finance companies, and self-insured organizations and strategic partners. We also have about 400 employees who work with law enforcement, technology experts, government officials, prosecutors, and the public to lead a united effort to prevent and combat insurance fraud and crime. We use big data and various intelligence sources to identify risks and anticipate emerging threats for our members. We develop curriculum and manage advanced intelligence training academies for law enforcement officers, investigators, and intelligence analysts on various topics, which include identity theft and fraud. And as an organization, we also advocate for issues that affect the industry. So we educate, right? So we, especially with the public, we want to make sure that you have the information and the tools that you need in order to not be a victim or to understand what the various types of crimes are, whether it's identity theft and fraud or other types of insurance type fraud.
Thank you much. Jeff?
Hi, my name is Jeff Carberg. I'm the director of the Identity Theft Program at the Maryland Office of the Attorney General. And so that means I wear a lot of different hats. I work with identity theft victims. If someone discovers they've been a victim of identity theft, our office also receives data breach notices. So when a company gets hacked and all the personal information gets stolen, they send it to our office. And I also do a lot of outreach, consumer education, things like this. And I really like this because this means you're not victims yet. And so we can talk to you and tell you all this helpful stuff. We can talk to you about the difference between new account fraud and existing account fraud, why credit freezes are important, why you shouldn't trust caller ID anymore, and that sort of thing. So I've put together, and I'll talk about this more later, but I've put together essentially a small, I'll touch on those resources later, but thank you.
Okay, thank you. Sue.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sue Rogan. I'm with the Cash Campaign of Maryland, which stands for Creating Asset Savings and Hope. We're a statewide nonprofit organization that provides programs and services to help people build their financial health, such as free tax preparation, financial education, financial coaching, benefit screening, along with a banking program to help people get access to safe and affordable banking products. So for identity theft, we do, as with others, a lot of outreach to help people understand what are the risks and what can they do if it's happened. We also do an awful lot of referrals to the AG's office, to Jeff, and to the Better Business Bureau. So it's great to be here to share some of the ideas and tips that we have. Again, is just to prevent people from becoming victims of identity theft and fraud.
Great, thank you. And Robert.
Good afternoon, everybody. Robert Barron. I am the Associate Commissioner for Property and Casualty at the Maryland Insurance Administration. We are the state agency that is charged with regulating Maryland's insurance business. Most lines of business are state regulated, and so we regulate every insurance transaction that is within a regulated line of business here in the state of Maryland. And the Property and Casualty Division that I sit atop of is charged also with consumer protection, including complaints that might involve identity theft insurance.
Great. Well, thank you all. We've got such a great diverse group of experts with us. We're going to start with a discussion question for the panelists.
Oh, you forgot Angie.
Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize, Angie. Sorry.
That's okay. Angie Barnett, President and CEO of the Better Business Bureau. Better Business Bureau, BBB, is we are one of 98 BBBs across the US and Canada. We aggregate data on scam through Scam Tracker. That's where we do a lot of our investigative work. The work that we or the information we receive, we also share with the AG's office. We share it with state and federal entities as a whole, so we contribute to the aggregation of data about scams and fraud. And in addition, we provide to consumers in Maryland profiles on about 52,000 businesses in which they can look and see and read for themselves the customer experience so they can determine if this is a business they trust. And in addition, we also provide the free service of customer complaints and customer reviews. So all of this data is what we feed into being able to offer tips to avoid scams, whether it's Scam Tracker or just looking at some of the practices of bad businesses. So that's Better Business Bureau. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, so now we will have a discussion question for the panelists. And to keep the discussion more organic, we won't actually go in order, but we'll just try to have a nice discussion. So panelists, feel free to jump in at any time. So the question is, we seem to be hearing more and more about incidents of identity theft, fraud, and scams these days. So I'd like you to tell us what you're seeing in Maryland specifically and what tips you would provide to Marylanders to protect themselves and their businesses.
I'd be happy to start. I've just sort of coincidentally, I've just been putting together some stats. In 2013, when I started, identity theft was still, I don't want to say it was new or anything, but I worked with about 800 victims that year, and we had about 234 data breach notices received by the office. Now, cut to 2021, that number had increased to about 1,900 identity theft victims and over 1,700 data breach notices. So what we were getting in a month 10 years ago, we're getting in a week now. And so all of those data breach notices that are going out to Marylanders mean that each person that receives that has an increased risk of identity theft. And so that it's all the more important to check your credit reports, freeze your credit reports. And I know over the pandemic, or even now, a lot of us spent more time at home or more time on the computer. And that led to a rise in sort of either tech-focused scams or phone-related scams for people who may have been more isolated. So I think that certainly went up.
I put both our names in it. It's Cooper Orange. Oh. So.
Yeah, I'd be happy to jump in from a BBB perspective. Jeff left, where I'm going to start off. What we have seen is an 87% increase in online scams since 2015. That is the most prevalent scam we see. Online scams include everything from imposter websites where they say they're the IRS or they say they're any particular business, but the scammer is designed to collect your personal identifying information, minimum a credit card, maximum additional information. And second to that is social media scams, and that being where scammers are actually, they're posting those contests, or they might post where you take a quiz, but you're actually providing to a scammer a lot of personal identifying information that they can aggregate and use collectively to begin to pose as you. So again, for us, reported through Scam Tracker, 87% increase since 2015. That is the most prevalent source of identity theft that we're experiencing and being reported to us.
Wow,
So I
thank
kind of want to go off of what she was just talking about, is that when we talk, and what Jeff mentioned earlier too, is I was actually in law enforcement before I came to the National Insurance Crime Bureau. I spent 14 years in our financial crimes unit. And, you know, Jeff was right. I mean, back in the time that he's talking about, it was relatively new in the way that for folks to understand what it is. It's been around for a long time. And he talked about data breaches, and that's a significant way that they're getting information. But we don't want to forget about the fact that it's not just about the computer, it's also about people. So we have just as many collusive employees at locations that are providing your personal identifying information to others. So you have to be really careful about where you're providing your social security number. So you want to ask specifically, is it required? What do you need it for? And do you really need it? So if you're getting a loan or something like that, or it's financial, you're going to need to use your social. But for something else, you really need to ask. A lot of what we're seeing with National Insurance Crime Bureau is based on, you know, folks using your stolen personal information to buy cars, to rent cars, to get rental properties, to get those insurance policies on those vehicles, and either file claims for a variety of different things, whether it's the staged or caused accident. There's a whole nother lesson about what those kinds of things are. But they're filing claims against the insurance companies and or the businesses are, because they're losing out of the product, like the vehicles, high-end vehicles, which are being shipped overseas. But that's an important thing to realize, is that your information is not just used to open bank accounts. It can be used to open insurance policies and to buy cars and to get rental policies on apartments. I have victims of identity theft who, you know, folks have rented apartments in their names and then got renters policies and filed claims against it to make money off of the insurance companies. And it was mentioned about the social media. That is another thing with technology, is, you know, especially these younger generations. And I read something yesterday that they said that teenagers were being scammed more than anybody else right now, because they're trusting, they're on social media, they're providing their information. And if you ever notice, if you've got Facebook, I know I do, and I get this pop up every day that said, hey, today is so-and-so's birthday. That's an indicator right there that your Facebook page is not private and that anybody can see that. So they can see your full birth date. You're providing them with information that they can use to steal your identity. And stop answering those things that come across that say, hey, who's your best friend from high school? And what was your dog's name? And what's your favorite color? Because what do we use those for? Our passwords on our bank accounts, right? Because we've got to use something that we remember, and that's what they're doing. So I'm glad you brought up social media, because from my perspective, that's a huge problem, is that people just put so much information out there that we're feeding the fraudsters with what they need to steal your identity and be able to open up bank accounts, insurance policies, buy cars, or do that kind of stuff.
Thank you for that tip about birthdays. I'm going to change my Facebook account to hide my birthday.
And I'd like to chime in, totally agree with everything that people have been saying, but I just want to also point out that we're seeing a huge increase in fintech products. So financial institutions, people doing scams with Zelle. I just got an email from a colleague yesterday that a friend of theirs lost all their money in their account because they got a phone call. Allegedly, it was their bank. It was not, saying there's something wrong with their account. course, they gave information over the phone, and then Zelle, was enacted and everything got drained out of the account. The other fintech products like Venmo, Cash App, they're meant to be very helpful in terms of helping us pay and, share things with people and stuff, but they're not protected. They don't have the same regulations in place for them like the FDIC insured institutions do. So people need to be very careful when they are transferring any money or using any of these fintech products, that everything is double checked, and everybody calling somebody saying there's a problem with your account is absolutely fraudulent and needs to hang up.
Yeah, I don't have a lot to add about to what everybody else has already said, but in particular, the theme that you hear running through all of these comments is how important it is to be careful, right? And we in the insurance world, we kind of use this fancy word called mitigation, which is what we're talking about there. And the most important thing you can do in mitigating or reducing your risk of becoming a victim is to be vigilant about all these kinds of online activities, your passwords. So many of us, included, have, we have so many passwords. We tend to write them down. A lot of times we write them down all in one convenient place for us. Guess what? That's also convenient for, somebody to get a hold of. Whatever focus as individuals and businesses that you can you can put on to increase your awareness and your the care that you put into protecting that kind of information, that's the most important thing anyone or any business can do as part of a risk mitigation plan.
That's great. Yeah, I could give a little quick first person story. I got a call from Cash App saying that they asked me if I had ordered anything from Idaho. And I thought, no, that's strange. And they were from the fraud department. So I thought, then they asked me for my phone number, which I gave them. Then they asked for my passcode. And that's what I realized. You're not really from the fraud department at Cash App, but I was like 5 seconds away from giving them my information because I trusted them. So they sounded convincing.
Can I add one more thing on
Sure.
that note? So I've done a lot of these consumer talks all over the state. And I've talked with a lot of victims who've fallen for these sorts of scams. And I wish I could put everyone in the same room and show that it's not stupid people who are falling for the scams. It is reasonable, trusting, distracted, maybe sick, maybe the coincidence, a series of coincidences lined up. But this truly can happen to anyone. Someone who sat through one of my talks for like 5 years in a row, was homesick or home with her sick 2-year-old, picked up the phone and promptly rattled off her social security number when asked by the caller. And she thought, oh my goodness, I spend my life telling senior citizens not to do this. So I just want to reiterate that this can and does happen to very smart, very knowledgeable, very reasonable people. And this is not something that, only had people aren't deserving of it when this happens, and it can happen to any of us.
Good point. Well, thank you for that great discussion. Now we're going to move to specific questions designed specifically for our experts. So we've got 2 to 3 minutes per person, and we'll start with Missy Coyne from the National Insurance Crime Bureau. So Ms. Coyne, the NICB is a national organization. Are the trends we are seeing in Maryland similar to those across the country? And what is NICB doing to address these trends?
So yes, absolutely. What you're seeing in Maryland is very similar in nature to what we see in other parts of the country. So it's not just through an NICB perspective. I'm also part of a International Association of Financial Crimes Investigators. So we roundtable with folks from all over the country. If you think about it, before technology arrived, is that a lot of times you would find a crime may start on the West Coast and it would take like maybe a couple of years to get here to the East Coast. But now with technology and social media, they're using like Instagram and TikTok in order to brag about what they're doing and how they're doing it. And you can go on YouTube and you can find out how to defraud a bank, or it'll tell you what banks are the best, easiest to defraud, or what businesses you can go into, or how to dupe a business, how to be able to get what you want from them. So we are seeing the same types of crimes across the country. What you might see is a different facet, right? Because maybe they're incorporating their own technique into what they're doing. So maybe something they're doing over in California is similar to what we're doing here, but they're adding their own technique. Something else I found through the years, especially with law enforcement, is that fraud has a high recidivism rate. So we find a lot of fraudsters that they'll go to jail and then they'll come back out and they'll do the same type of crime over again, but they'll change one little aspect of it or do it just a little bit different. So we definitely are seeing the same types of things regardless of where we are in the country. What is NICB doing? We are working with law enforcement. We are working with the insurance companies. And of course, we're also working with the public. So we provide the public with information as well on our website at nicb.org. So there's a lot of material there or information about different types of scams, especially related to, like stealing cars. We were talking about that when we first got on here, leaving your key fobs in your cars, or, how not to be a victim of different types of scams, like the when we during hurricane season or tornado season, or the rainy season when scammers are coming out from the roofers or the contractors, how to avoid being a victim of those types of scams. So we're providing information, and of course, helping our insurance companies, our insurance member companies, and bring cases that need that prosecution, that need to go to the prosecutors, bringing them to law enforcement and doing what we can to, get that bad guy out of there so he can't scam anybody else.
That's great. You mentioned there's a lot of recidivism. Is there a certain type of fraud that gets done more than others that people go back to?
I mean, identity theft is huge. And I'm talking from personal experience cases that I did is, even and when I came to NICB, one of my very first cases was someone I had put in jail when I was in law enforcement. I got an alert yesterday, and they're looking for information on a young lady who was involved in credit card fraud. Credit card fraud falls under identity theft. So from from a federal law enforcement agency, and I'm like, I had her case back in 2015, and we charged her again in 15 from a case, she got out from 2013, from a 2013 case, got out in 15, started right back up. I put away folks for identity theft and credit card fraud, and they get 10 years and they come out. And within 5 months, they're back at it. I got a case right now that it's a vehicle finance fraud case, and the guy never did vehicles before. So that's why he says they change a facet of what they do in the fraud, but he's using stolen identity information. Businesses, he was social engineering, calling the businesses and saying he was an employee in the invoice section, and that, or the purchasing section rather, and he would convince companies to let him into their accounts, and he'd purchase phones and iPads and steal banking information. So, and he spent 5 years in jail. He got out within 6 months, he's doing it again. So, I deal with identity thieves. So that's what I see is a lot of these identity thieves I deal with, they're coming out and they're just right back at it. It's all they know. It's what they know. And, how they're getting their information. It could be online, like, Jeff was talking about the data breaches. It could be an employee. Most of my stuff came from medical facilities, but that's not the only place. So that's why I want to just reiterate about being very careful who you're giving your social security number and personal identifying information to out there.
All right, great. All right, Mr. Carberg, has your office seen an increase in identity theft, fraud, and scams over the years? And what specific actions does your office do to if you become aware of an incident? And what are some of the resources that consumers can look to for support?
So I mentioned at the top of this that we certainly have seen an increase. And so what we'll do when if a victim reaches out to our office, I can provide direct, guidance or advice. And to that extent, I've put together sort of a blueprint or roadmap of what to do if you're a victim of identity theft. And hopefully everyone can see a small copy of it here on the bottom of the screen. It's got my contact information, my phone number, my email, and my fax machine. So this will be posted, this will be shared, and this will have all my contact information. So I see a lot of the questions in the sidebar already are things that I really want to jump into, but I'm going to hold off and just encourage some of those people to follow up with me after the meeting if they want to. And I'll provide my contact information in the chat as well. So when somebody calls in, I'll walk them through, hey, was this existing account fraud? You know, did they get into your checking account? Was this new account fraud? Did they open a car loan? And work with them to help them either get police reports or put together a dispute letter, checking their credit reports. You can check your credit report weekly right now under COVID restrict or changes they made under COVID. So through the end of the year, you can check your credit reports once a week. So I encourage everyone, if you've made the trouble to come listen to this, go make the trouble to check your credit reports. You just don't know what you're going to find, especially if you haven't checked it in a while. I also like to talk about prevention, doing credit freezes. All of this information is in this 6 or 7 page PDF that you all can get. So I won't bore you with the addresses and the phone numbers. It's all there, and you can go through it at your own convenience. I do want to talk a little bit about some specific things that I have become aware of, or the tips that I want to give people specifically, that so much of this starts as scams or fraud begins over the phone, right? So your telephone can only do one of two things. It can make calls or it can receive calls. So I want to make sure that everyone is extra skeptical for incoming calls. What the trick that these scammers do is they activate our fight or flight reaction that's sort of deep in our brain. They tell us something so scary, something so big, that it literally causes a physiological reaction. We get a shot of adrenaline, we may start to panic. They call and say this is law enforcement or the IRS, and boy, are you in big trouble. And we do things we would normally never, ever do. So I really want to just encourage people to know that if you ever get a call from an incoming call that tells you with big scary news, the best thing in the world you can do is hang up. If it's a government agency, we'll follow up with letters, or we'll try again a different way, and we won't bully you and harass you into providing this information. And the last thing, I don't know how many people are aware of this, is that caller IDs can be spoofed. So the scammers can make it look like the White House is calling you if they want to. So please don't rely on the caller IDs. They often spoof law enforcement or other governmental agencies in order to perpetuate their scam. So that's sort of what I've got for now. And I know that I see people asking about the PDF. That will be posted to the website. And you can also find my contact information at marylandattorneygeneral.gov. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carberg. All right, Sue Rogan from the Cash Campaign of Maryland. Ms. Rogan, the Cash Campaign focuses on financial education and helping consumers improve their financial status. Please tell us what a consumer should do if they believe that their credit has been compromised because of identity theft or fraud.
Thank you. And that's really important because a lot of people don't even know that they've been a victim of identity theft until they check their credit report. As you saw previously with Jeff's information here, it is critical to check your credit report frequently. We now obviously have the right to do it very frequently every week, but certainly put a system together in place that you're checking yours, whether it's, every 6 months, once a week, whatever it is, just make sure you have a system in place so you don't forget. So checking the credit report is where you will see if accounts have been opened up. So as you also see, there was a dispute letter that Jeff's office put together. You have the right under federal law to dispute accounts on there that are not accurate. So following up with that, keeping the paper trail, making sure that you know that you're going to get that response back within the required time of about 30 days, and following up if you do not. And it's really critical. I just want to emphasize what Jeff was saying about the credit freeze, just to make sure we're on the same page with that. That literally means that no credit will be opened up in your name by yourself or by anyone else. It is relatively easy to do now. It's free under federal and Maryland law. So it's an important step to take, either if you've been a victim of identity theft, or frankly, I encourage everyone, if you don't need credit right now, put a freeze on it. You can unfreeze it if you need to get a car loan or a mortgage, and then refreeze it back. So take that step to make sure that you're really shutting down any credit accounts being opened up in your name, and therefore thwarting all of the victims, of identity theft, being able to make sure that you're not happening to that. And then the other thing I want to talk about a little bit is tax ID. So identity theft happens with taxes as well. Sometimes people get your information and file your tax return before you getting your refund or filing fraudulent information. We are able to help people with that in terms of remediating that. We work with the different legal aid and Maryland Volunteer Lawyers Service as well to make sure that people get that straightened out and get a PIN number for when they're filing taxes to ensure that they are the correct person who's filing. So both with credit, it's really important to check the credit report on a regular basis, make sure you're monitoring what's on there, and even disputing things such as inaccurate addresses or birthdays. Those can all be signs that identity theft is happening. So making sure everything on the credit report is accurate, putting that freeze just to make sure you're not going to be a victim, or if you are a victim, to make sure you're not going to have any more credit accounts opened up, disputing things that are inaccurate. And if you're having difficulty with tax preparation, the biggest step I'd say is to file early and get your return into the IRS before anyone else does, but to really guard your information. And if you have difficulty with tax identity theft, reach out to us for assistance. We're happy to help with that.
Great. And does the credit freeze impact your existing credit cards, or is it only for additional future credit requests?
Thank you. Good question. It does not impact what you currently have in terms of a mortgage, a car loan, or credit cards. You can continue to use those accounts just as you would normally. It just actually means no new credit can be opened up in your name.
Oh, great. Thank you. All right, Angie Barnett from the Better Business Bureau. Ms. Barnett, the BBB interacts with businesses every single day. What should a consumer do before they start working with the business to protect themselves against fraud and scams? And how can consumers report incidents of fraud or scams to the BBB?
Yeah. Starting with what can everyone here do? I'm going to say that we are one of many resources to use by simply going to bbb.org. You can look up a business and you can look that business up from anywhere in the US and Canada. So it doesn't have to be just Maryland, using bbb.org. What you're going to find is you find out what we have received from customers who post either complaints or reviews, that we are able to verify that that customer is actually a real customer. It's not somebody's mother posting a review, but we provide that information. So that's imperative. But our second tool that I find to be really helpful with this topic, because the business profiles through bbb.org are legitimate businesses, real businesses. They may not be having the most ethical business behaviors, but they're real. On the other hand, we have a tool called Scam Tracker. Scam Tracker can be accessed by anyone. You post a scam, whether you do not have to be a victim, but you have touched or experienced a scam, and we aggregate that data. It's almost, it is a real-time data. That data is accessed by federal and state agencies who look at the trends that are being self-reported to BBB. We are not an enforcement agency, but what we do is we aggregate this data for enforcement, as I mentioned, but secondary to provide you with tips. So BBB has on its website, bbb.org, you can have consumer tips for just about any topic, including identity theft. We give you the source of where we get our information. So it is an education and resource tool. Also, I do have a team member, Michael, who answers the phone all day long, and he spends all of his time trying to convince people you didn't win the lottery, you didn't win the sweepstakes, BGE is not calling you, the IRS isn't calling you. So we have a real life person who also helps people with their questions, and again, operating just as a nonprofit entity.
Great, well, thank you. All right, Robert Barron from the Maryland Insurance Administration. Mr. Barron, many insurance companies offer identity theft insurance coverage either as a standalone policy or as an addition to other policies like homeowners insurance. Please tell us about these policies and what consumers should look for when shopping and comparing these policies.
Sure. Insurance is an interesting concept. It's one of the only services, maybe the only service that nobody really wants to buy, right? You don't really want to spend money on insurance. And then when you do buy it, you don't really ever want to use it, right? Because if you're using your insurance, something has gone wrong. And then when you do use it, in many instances, you'll end up paying more for it going forward as you need it in the future. So all that to say that pretty much nobody wakes up in the morning and says, oh goody, I have to buy some insurance today. But when you do need to shop for insurance, there's a ton of considerations to think about. And when it comes to what we're talking about today, identity theft, and I'm going to not say identity theft insurance, I'm going to say, for starters here, identity theft protection.
Okay.
Because a lot of the products that we're talking about are in fact not insurance. They're not insurance policies, and they're not products that we regulate at the Insurance Administration. Many of these services or products, if you will, are things like, credit monitoring products, and or you've bought another product like software for your computer, and it has come with some sort of protection plan. And those things are not insurance contracts. And so you need to think about what it is you need and what your, in other words, what your risks are, and then what kind of product do you need. And then once you've decided that, if it does turn out that it's an insurance product, then you want to look closely at what it is you're buying, how much it costs, who you're buying it from. All of our large property insurance companies that insure your home or your business, these days, they mostly all have some sort of identity theft protection product that they offer. And so if you buy identity theft protection from an insurer that you have a property policy with, and you buy it as a endorsement to that policy, then it is going to be an insurance product that we have regulatory authority over. But these products are not the same from one insurer to the next. In fact, they can vary dramatically. So once you've figured out, what you as an individual or your business, what kind of protection you need, then you want to see what it is your insurer offers. So whether it is a monitoring service, like monitoring your credit or monitoring the title history on real estate that you own, offering reimbursement or payment upfront for the cost of remediating a identity theft incident. So some products have that kind of benefit. There are products that will offer legal defense if you find yourself as a victim of identity theft being sued. What most identity theft protection products do not offer is what we would call a direct indemnity benefit. So if somebody's stolen your identity, and I forget which panelist mentioned this earlier in the call about the account being drained of money, right? So you've lost your identity to somebody who has accessed your bank account and taken all your money. There's no real identity theft protection that is going to say, oh, here's a check for the balance that you just lost. But there are tons of regulatory resources available to you. So if it's not us at the Insurance Administration looking at an insurance product, then there is the Department of Financial Regulations and the Banking Commissioner to help you with banks and credit card companies and the like. So in short, as an individual or a business, analyze what your risks are, decide what your risk tolerance level is, and then look for a product. If you need insurance as part of your plan to protect yourself, look for a product that meets your needs. And we're available here at the Insurance Administration. You can do this on our website or with a phone call. If you're looking at buying a product and you're not sure about the company you're buying it from, check with us. We can quickly and easily tell you if that insurer is licensed and in good standing.
All right. Well, thank you very much, all of you. I want to thank all of our panelists for being with us today and sharing their expertise. And before we go to the Q&A section, I want to give the panelists a chance to mention anything that they think should be brought up that hasn't been mentioned by anybody.
I have one other item.
Okay.
There's just an agency that's not here today, but we've talked a little bit, like I just mentioned, about checking to see whether a company that you are thinking about doing business with is actually, licensed and in good standing. And Ms. Barnett at BBB helps out with that with businesses in general. But also we have the Maryland Home Improvement Commission. And if you're looking to, one large area of just scams, consumer scams in general, is home improvement. So if you're considering entering into a contract or a deal or doing business with a contractor, you can check with the MHIC, and you can do this on their website to see whether that particular contractor is licensed and in good standing at the MHIC.
All right, well, thank you very much. All right, so now we're going to go to the Q&A, and I'm going to start with some of the chat questions. I'm a victim of identity theft and have another 7-year alert on my credit, which doesn't seem to matter. Credit cards and bank accounts are being opened in this person's name. They've been trying to work with the companies to close them down, but they're closed down everything that's fraudulent. Let's see what else they said. I need help. Who can assist me with keeping track of this activity? They're concerned now that it's tax season.
Sure. So I want to encourage this person to reach out to me after the presentation here. But this question is great because it teases out something that is missed on a lot of folks. So there's something called a fraud alert, and there's something called a credit freeze. And the fraud alert is really just a red flag that they put on your credit files. It says, hey, we're supposed to make sure that's Jeff applying for the credit card. Whereas the credit freeze completely blocks access to your credit files. And so even if I have your name and social security number, I can't go apply for a boat loan unless you are there to lift the credit freeze. So I really want to, the jargon here is really important, and that can get lost when in the world of identity theft sometimes. So I just want to really stress credit freeze is the way to go for actual prevention and protection here. And so, yes, rather than get into the specifics of this person's question, I'll just have them reach out to me, and I'll be happy to go through that with them at the conclusion of this.
Great.
And the
What
only
should
thing,
you, go ahead.
sorry, the only thing I will add is please file your taxes as soon as possible. Be the first one to file it if you're worried about tax fraud.
Great.
The IRS also offers an identity protection PIN program that you can sign up for if you are a repeat victim of identity fraud, and it gives you sort of a unique, essentially password or PIN code, so that only you can file your tax return each year. It's a great prevention tool, and I can follow up with information about that if others are curious.
Great. Here's another question. What should you do when you receive an email about a bank account that you never opened, or an email from PayPal that you have a Bitcoin bill?
Yeah, I'll do that one really quick.
Sure.
What we always encourage people to do is, first of all, hang up, don't engage. If it's coming through email, text message, there's two things you can do. You can report it to the institution that is legitimate, to let them know that fraud's occurring using their name, using their font, their logo, etc. But you can also just simply set up things in your email and in your phone that you can report. And I report every one of those. I forward it to and say, this is spam, and I do report it. But what we always want to say is don't engage. The second you answer the phone, the second you answer an email, the second you start, you're letting all scammers know you're alive, you're here, and you're going to engage with them. Number two, they will do everything they can to gain your trust, to create a sense of urgency, to get you to engage with them. The more you engage, the more likely you are to build that trust relationship, and you might fall for a scam. So we just it's really simple to say, don't engage. If you want to forward it to an institution, if you want to forward it to your carrier, great. Just don't engage. And I apologize for the simplicity of that message, but it's really what we believe in. We can save some of the heartache if we just wouldn't respond, and verify that and make sure that it is really a legitimate entity reaching out to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I
Yeah.
add just one more
Please.
piece? Oh, I'm sorry. If Missy wants to go, I'll let her go first.
Okay.
I was just going to
Go ahead, Jeff.
go. Oh, sorry. The scammers use our curiosity and fear against us. And so humans are very curious people. And so Angie was saying, do not engage, do not click. If you think it is legit, do not click, do not click. You know how to go to paypal.com. You know how to go to facebook.com. Don't use their links. Go find it yourself. I just never, ever click a link in an email these days. So do not click the links. Go find your own way there. And that way you can check if you're losing sleep, if your PayPal account is hacked or not. You just want peace of mind. Go to PayPal yourself. That's all.
Well, and just to add to what Jeff said, that's exactly what I was going to say anyway, is that you know whether or not you have an account with that entity, whether it's PayPal or it's Amazon, or even if it's the bank. So if you don't have an account with that bank and you're getting a text or an email from them, you can either I would say ignore it, just like Angie said, don't engage, because that's what they're trying to do. Is once you engage with them, they've drawn you in and you're not going to be able to get rid of them. And if you are really concerned about it, that you have a couple of options: is call the bank directly. Even if there's no link, but there's a phone number, never call the phone number that's in the message, because that phone number you can spoof, just like it's been talked about by one of the other panelists. Is you can spoof these phone numbers and they can make them look like it's the bank or it's a person or a business. So you don't want to call their number and you don't want to click on their link. Is go to Google. Find the legitimate business number and call them. But if you don't have an account with them, then I wouldn't even bother with it. You've got the ability to check your credit. You can get a copy of your credit report once a year for free, all 3 credit reporting agencies. So check your credit report if you're concerned that maybe they've opened up an account using your information. The credit freeze is a great option, especially if you are you're not going to be doing anything. You can open it up when you need it. You can close it down when you need it, and do it with each of the agencies. Don't just pick one, do it with all 3 of them. So that way, if not all businesses use the same exact credit reporting agency. So you want to make sure that that credit freeze is on all 3 of them.
And if I can just quickly say, you can also check your bank accounts, credit unions and financial institutions at Check Systems. I'll put that in here too. You can also get a copy of your report from this data system as well.
Oh, cool. All right, someone is using my home address as their address. I do not know this person and they've never lived at my address. I recently received a jury summons in this person's name at my address. Have you seen a lot of this, and what can this person do? If they've got a jury summons, that means they've registered to vote or gotten an ID or license in Maryland at that address.
So they need to contact the courthouse. Yeah, go ahead, Missy. I'm sorry.
No, you're right. For the jury summons, the courthouse, but contact the post office and let them know you're getting mail that doesn't belong to you, and send it back. That'll keep it from coming to your house, but just let your mail carrier know. If they're not helping you, go to the post office.
You should also check your credit reports. Make sure that this isn't, there's going to be more clues. If you're getting jury summons in their name, I suspect they're doing more with that information. So check and freeze those credit reports.
All right, let's see. Several clients have fallen victim to debit card and credit card skimming, particularly clients using their Independence cards at local stores in Baltimore City. Benefits are added to their card, and within hours in the middle of the night, the benefits are withdrawn in Little Havana, Miami, Florida. Social Services is offering no resolution, but they've started initiating police reports. This actually made the news. I saw this on the news a few months ago.
I will encourage this person to follow up with me. There's been some reports about this, and there may be some of this may be changing. I'm not sure. So I want to encourage this person to follow up with me, but I'm getting several reports of this as well.
All right. Let's see. All right, I think that's it for all of the questions. Actually, no, let's see. Do you suggest providing Social Security number on employment applications?
So if you don't mind, I'll kind of speak to
Please.
that. We do get a lot of scams that are employment scams. So it's not uncommon for that to happen. What I would you definitely need to provide it to the employer when you get to the point where you're gaining employment with them, because that's what your finance, the taxes and everything has to come through. What I would recommend is that in the application itself, is you don't put your social, and then when you have follow-up conversations with the employer, one, make sure it's a legitimate employer, you know, legitimate business. And then after you follow up with them and you know, because they also use that social security number for your background check if you're going to get hired. So, but initially I would hold off on doing that. I wouldn't put it on there.
Here's a question. What about Norton Identity Theft Protection or similar products? Don't you have to give them all of your information so they know what to look for? I'm leery of that, but then I'm not getting what I'm paying for. Are these products safe?
I can answer from a BBB perspective. We're going to tell you, first of all, you can do most anything they do. You can do yourself by checking your credit reports. We always offer and extend to people warnings to when they start looking at credit repair and entities that claim to be able to protect your ID or to correct your credit by simply disputing all the elements in your credit report. We say enter into that very slowly and cautiously. You want to look at fees and things that they're going to charge. And my bottom line is BBB advises most anything they do, you can do yourself. And it does begin by checking. We advise people annualcreditreport.com. That website, annualcreditreport.com, will enable you to access all three credit reporting bureaus. And that's always our piece of advice first. I'm not going to disparage a company. I'm just saying you can do much of that yourself. It takes
Right.
time, I know, but you can.
Thank you. Can a parent freeze a minor's credit?
Yes, and actually the
Yes.
Federal Trade Commission, if you go to their website, they actually have directions about how to freeze a child's credit. So a parent can do it.
And I'd like to add that Maryland was the first state in the country to allow this. You can also freeze it for if you have a parent or an older relative under a guardianship. It's a great way to protect vulnerable people who have no business, applying for credit or have moved past that phase of life or something. It's a great way to protect vulnerable folks.
Great. Should we contact our bank directly and set a rule or a password as additional protection? Will they do that?
So one thing I can mention on that is that the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau has a really cool program that they've launched called Trusted Contact. It's voluntary, so it's not required for financial institutions, but it's suggested that if you go to your financial institution and say, if there's something suspicious in my account and you can't reach me, here's who I trust that you can call and verify if there's anything that needs to be done about this. So you can go to your financial institution and say, I want to participate in the CFPB's Trusted Contact program. Here's my trusted contact, and hopefully the bank will take that. But again, it is voluntary. It's not required.
All right.
And we encourage everybody to put two-factor authentication on everything you do, from credit cards, online bill paying, everything you touch, that it's not fail-proof. I'm not at all saying that, but that two-factor authentication, it may be a little inconvenient to have to type in a password or a code that they send you to your email or your phone. But boy, that extra layer can really help. So set that up on everything you can.
Yeah, and be careful what passwords you're using. If you're going to set up a password, don't use your mother's maiden name. Don't use your favorite color. Don't use the information you're putting on social media. So try to make sure that it's a unique password that not just anybody's going to know, or that you are sharing, or they'd be able to find that information with a Google search or a social media search.
Great. This is an interesting question. I have dual citizenship in America and Canada. I sometimes get automated calls telling me I owe a crazy amount of money in taxes, and if I don't pay right away, I'll be arrested. I think we've all got that one. Strange thing is, sometimes they call us from the IRS, and other times it's from Revenue Canada. Does that mean they already know that they already have some of my information? Because how else would they know that I'm a dual citizen?
So I can touch on this a little bit. I think there's sort of an entire invisible economy out there called data brokers that collect a tremendous amount of information about each and every one of us, and they sell it to advertisers. And so if you sell red sweaters to people over 50 years old in a certain zip code, and you'd like to open a blue sweater store, you can buy that information of very, very drilled down, detailed information about a certain demographic. And I'm sure that there are data brokers out there who sell information related to immigration or people who may be immigrants, and scammers buy that or steal it and target those folks with extortion or imposter schemes, trying to, again, scare the daylights out of them, to uproot their whole lives, to get them to quickly pay money before they can contact a legitimate government agency or seek legal help and get straight answers. So it is certainly possible that they do know that you are a dual citizen, or perhaps just an immigrant, or have an immigrant in the family. I encourage everyone, if you've never done it, Google your name and see how much information just pops up out there. It's a little bit frightening sometimes.
And Jeff, I don't mean to jump in, but I'm going to say
Please,
the way
please.
they know if you do red sweaters or blue sweaters is when we start engaging in those contests, in those surveys, when we want to see what flower we're going to be if I was a flower, and all that's in social media. That
Sure.
You aggregate all of that, and it's amazing what we actually share about ourselves.
And we also save 15 cents at the grocery store by using our card that's tied to our name, right? That's bundled up and then sold. You know, it's just, if you stop and think about it, all the data collection points in our lives, there's a lot.
Sure.
Yeah, I always found it interesting that when I would go to another state, because I travel a lot, that no sooner, like within a couple of hours of me being in that state, I'd start getting spam calls from phone numbers in that particular state. And, you know, we've been talking about social media, right? What we're sharing on social media, or, you know, here I am, you know, I'm in Southern West Virginia, but if I go to California, all of a sudden I start getting calls from California. If you have dual citizenship and you're traveling from the United States to Canada, if your location services are on your phone, and while you're in Canada, you're doing Google searches or searches on the internet, or you're looking for places to eat, you know, I don't know if they're pinging someone. I know that's conspiracy theory probably, but you know, you got to think about like you said, there's so many data points that are sharing our information and what we're doing. So it could be any number of ways that they're getting your information.
Right. Well, it's almost 1 o'clock. So if you've got additional questions, you can contact our panelists directly. Their information is on your screen now. So I want to thank all of our panelists once again, and want to thank all of our Zoom participants as well. At the end of today's event, you will receive a link to a short survey. Please complete it as soon as you can. And if you'd like to review this information here or share the webinar with others, this recording and the other materials will be put on the MIA website in the next few days. If you'd like to sign up for our monthly e-newsletter, you can do that on our website as well. And that address is insurance.maryland.gov. And when you're on the opening page, click on the newsletter graphic, or just scroll to the very, very bottom of the page and hit subscribe. Our next lunch with Mia is in 2 days on January 12th, and the topic is winter weather preparedness. I hope to see many of you on Thursday or at a future event. Have a wonderful afternoon, and please stay protected. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, panelists.